Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Keith Fleming. This is the Daily Fix podcast, Fantasy and Frames, only DFS podcast. This is a special edition. As always, I have my boy Joe the Brain Matz, but we are two times Joe tonight, as Joe Pepe is here to join us. Joe is a former TKO winner. I love this blurb you sent me. Now turned fantasy analyst. He writes for Fantasy Pros, is the host and analyst for Wager Wire. Sorry about that. Twitter Space, Dropping Dimes. That's on Wednesday nights, and the analyst for the live betting show DFS DK Slate Breaker Space Friday afternoons, and he is rocking a Philadelphia Eagles Christmas hat. We won't hold that against him. Joe, what is going on, my man?
What's up, guys? How you doing? This is a long time coming. I love this show, so I'm glad that I'm able to come on. I'm glad to hang out. I know I'm going to end up answering for Joe. I'll point this way to Joe by mistake because I just answer to Joe constantly. So I might interrupt a few times. I'm sorry.
This is a pro interrupt podcast. Jorge might tell me I interrupt a little too much, but all of us like to talk. It's probably why we're doing stuff like this on the side for a living, whatever you want to call it. Before we get into, obviously last week and all that stuff, Joe, I always ask people, how'd you get into the biz?
So funny story. Years ago at this point, the Bengals are playing the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. I read a love-hate article from Matthew Berry. I start Jeremy Hill. It's the game that Giovanni Bernard ran back and forth for like 90 yards and then scored a touchdown like 15 years ago. And I tweet Matthew Berry, and I'm like, that's the last time I listened to your article. He quote tweets me back. My phone blows up for like a week. I start like debating every single one of his Goonies that popped into my phone. And then I realized, I kind of really like doing this. I should go, find something. So I just, reached out to Bleacher Report, and I reached out to, Fantasy Data, and I reached out to pretty much anybody and got, 50 no's. But then, of course, Bleacher Report took me on. Fantasy Data took me on. I bounced around a little bit. Now I'm with Fantasy Pros. And I never shut up about sports anyway, so I might as well get paid for it.
I freaking love that story. First you don't succeed, try again. And it was destiny, which is the best part about it. We know you're an Eagles fan, obviously, by the hat. Any other teams? Are you all Philly, or what's the rest of your squads?
So I'm all Philadelphia teams first. Then I really love the Baltimore Orioles because they have a beautiful stadium and I like crab cakes. And then I'm actually a big fan of the Cincinnati Bengals because I was the Chad Ochocinco when I played sports. I'm a nice guy until I get on the field, and then I just trash talk you so bad that you hate me. So I fell in love with him. So I bounce around as long as there's no Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunately, Joe, no New York Giants, no Washington, whatever name they want to be for that year. I'm good with any other team. I have no problems, but mostly Philadelphia.
All right. Well, y'all are also in the, I hate you guys category as an Atlanta Falcons fan, because I really thought the year after we went to the Super Bowl and collapsed that we were going to win that game in Philly and then get back to the Super Bowl. And obviously that didn't happen. We had 4 tries from inside the 10. So
that was the scariest moment of my entire life. I'll never forget. Over and over and over again into the corner. And I'm like, oh my God, just stop him. Just please stop him.
The funny thing is, if you were followed the Falcons, the one thing that Julio Jones and Matt Ryan could never do was score touchdowns in the red zone ever. Yeah. It drove us crazy.
It's wild.
It's insane. Part of it is Julio never practiced, but that probably had a little bit of a part. But quick recap of last week. We had another good week. This has been seriously, just at this rate, an outrageous season for us. We had 29 total plays. The optimal lineup was 213. Buoyed by Joe's Josh Jacobs play. Great call, Joe. My love affair with Mike White will continue this week. We were all over him. Garrett Wilson. We had Elijah Moore on there. So I keep telling people this every week. I can't guarantee our picks will continue to be as good as they've been this season because they've just been unreal. But we will continue to give as much time and prep and everything that we do and try to make it as entertaining as possible while we give our plays moving forward. But, ride the hot hand, as anybody who's a gambler knows. Anything else we want to get into before we start, other than who the hell scored that first touchdown for the Patriots tonight?
And somebody who I couldn't bet on. Apparently, he was the guy that returned that punt the other week against the Jets. It was that. Yeah, it was apparently that same guy.
Because I looked it up and it said cornerback, and I'm going, what the fuck?
It's always that one player in Showdown, man. If he's on there and somebody literally picked him, I quit Showdown because it makes no sense.
They're a Terminator from the future sent back to win all of our money, which is ridiculous. All right, so each week, if you are new to this pod, thank you for joining us. We give an expensive, median, and bargain tier play at each position. We'll be having probably our guest Joe go first on most, but since me and Joe share the expensive tier quarterback, let's go and get that out of the way, Joe, right off the bat. We both love Joe Burrow. Friend of the pod, Joe Burrow, at this point. Me and Joe use him so much. 6,900 versus Kansas City. He's averaging over 27 points per game in his last 6, including 31.70 or more in half of those games. So Burrow, the struggles early in the season with the offensive line and everything, they figured it out. And a lot of this has been done without Jamar Chase, which is really impressive. The Chiefs are 24th in points allowed to opposing QBs, despite giving up 17.6 points combined in 2 games this season versus Malik Willis and Bryce Perkins last week. So if you think about it, they should be a lot worse than where they are. And the other 9, they've given up 20 or more points to opposing QBs 6 times, 17 or more points to opposing QBs 8 times, and at least 16 points in all 9. Burrow's getting back star receiver Jamar Chase. I know that's not breaking news, but in the 2 meetings last year versus the Chiefs, holy crap. Burrow had some games, 696 yards, 6 scores. Jamar Chase had the unbelievable game in, I believe it was January last year before the playoffs started, where he had over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Higgins is really, getting hot at the right time. I just think this team is dangerous in general. This is going to be a shootout, and Burrow's underpriced. Is that kind of the same reason you're on him, Joe Matz?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at that playoff game last year, which I believe, if my math is right, equaled out to about 18.5 fantasy points. That feels like the floor here, where worst case, we're right around that cusp of 20. But yeah, like you said, if you take out the 2 games against backup quarterbacks, Kansas City's given up multiple passing touchdowns in every single game. They give up touchdowns on 5.5% of their opposing passes. Second worst in the league. I assume Kansas City is going to light up Cincinnati as well because they're already out, their top corner for the season. So expect a lot of points in this. And especially with Chase back, I'm all in. I almost went with Herbert, who I believe Joe is going to talk about at some point here. But Burrow was 300 cheaper, so I'm rolling with him.
You're going the other side, right, Joe?
Yeah, I like this pick, and the only reason why I'm not picking this is so that the people aren't bored watching us and we all have Burrow. But Joe Burrow is one of my favorite. He's actually going to be the first one I write about on my Fantasy Pros article tomorrow. But I'm going with Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to the other side. I needed some piece of this game because this game has the potential of 60 or more points for me, and I need to be a part of it. And when you look at Mahomes, he's one of your safest bets in DFS. I mean, he hasn't scored under 22 points since week 3. So I know I kind of have it's a little bit of a lower floor, but I'll take that. I know where I'm getting to. I'm getting at least over 20 with him. Now he's had 6 straight games of 300 yards and six games of 3 touchdowns or more this season. So he's really lighting this thing up. And Kansas City sits at the 3rd highest pace of play in neutral game script, which I think this game is going to end up in a lot. And they come out hot in that first half too, where they like to lead in that first half. They're actually 4th in pace of play for the first half. So I think it's going to come out quick. It's going to come out fast. It's going to be a monster game again. I think we're throwing up 35-30, 42-35. I think something like that's coming from this game. And if I have to pick an expensive player, like you said, you guys took Joe Burrow. I'm looking around and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pay all the way up. I might as well pay all the way up for Patrick Mahomes because I got a guy who can make creative moves. I got a guy who can rush a little bit too. And then I have the chance of 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. So I can't say no to that. And it's worth it. I think he's 8,300 against them and he's playing the Bengals. I'll go for that every time.
All right, Joe, you got for your median somebody that I really like this week, mainly because he's playing the Vegas Raiders, Justin Herbert.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun play for me. I'm going to have, again, in my article, I have Justin Herbert, but that's one of the higher slates. If I don't feel like paying all that money for Mahomes, I'm just going to knock it down a little bit, go for Justin Herbert here. He's got that chance to 4 times the salary. He's got that chance to hit 33 points for me. I think that could come with this game against this defense. The Raiders defense is one I always want to target, as they allowed the 8th most passing yards. They're tied for 3rd in passing touchdowns and 6th in completions allowed. I mean, that's like the trifecta of what you really want from a quarterback. I know I want him to run a little bit, and maybe that happens, but with his ribs, I'm not really looking for that. I'm just looking for Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, Austin Eckler, who already has 80 receptions this year, and that's something that we'll talk about later because the Raiders are terrible against receiving running backs. Those pass-catching running backs blow that team up. And I think Justin Herbert attacks to that, attacks to Keenan Allen finally being healthy, and Gerald Everett still being a tight end, and that's something Raiders can't handle. I like it, and the Raiders are going to be able to throw up their points too. So, again, this has another chance to get close to that 60-point total for me, but I'm looking for at least like a 30 to 20 type score here, and I think Herbert's going to throw those points up.
Joe, you got Trevor, right, for your median tier?
Yeah, I got Trevor Lawrence down at 5,900 against our old friends, the Detroit Lions. He's trending in the right direction for one. 4 of the last 6 games, he's broke 20 on DK. Also, 4 of the last 6 games, over 70% completion percentage, which, that doesn't necessarily always help us in fantasy, but I just think it's a good sign. Multiple passing scores the last 2 weeks. Lions dead last against QBs on DK in fantasy points allowed. Nice little bonus with them is 3 straight games they've given up a rushing touchdown to the opposing QB. Now, granted, that's Fields, Daniel Jones, Josh Allen. But Trevor Lawrence is not a guy who's afraid to run the ball. So I think there's a reasonable chance he could punch one in this game. And this is another game, probably, less overall skill and more bad defense than we're talking about with that Kansas City-Cincinnati game. But I also think Jacksonville-Detroit has the potential to be an explosive game where we're looking at a 30 to 27 type game. So, yeah, as always, against the Lions, I like going for anyone against them. And I believe on PFF, they have the Jacksonville offensive line, not known as an elite offensive line, as having the biggest advantage over the defensive line in the pass game. So he should not be under much pressure.
All right, I'll do it for my median because somebody's got to take the villain. I'm going to take Deshaun Watson, 6,500 at Houston. It's all about the price. At 6,500, it's probably going to be the cheapest he's going to be the rest of the season. He's playing in a dome against his former team. He's obviously very familiar with Houston. I know that the real crux of the Houston D is the run D, but I just think the Browns have to make a statement here with Watson as their QB. There's no way they're going to want to come out of this game with him having any more egg on his face than he's already got on his face from all the stuff that's gone on this year since he got traded to the team. The Browns have a perfect QB for the style of offense that they've really been wanting to run with Stefanski all this time. They just haven't been able to, which is going to be moving away from this heavy offensive line stuff. And they're going to go, away from the multiple tight end stats. I think we're going to see more shotgun, more spread, where they can still run heavy. But the big difference is they can pick up these huge chunk plays, whether it be off play action or throwing more in early down situations. And I also believe in karma, which means that I think the Texans find a way to either win this game or at least keep it close, meaning that there's going to be more passing opportunities. I don't think this is going to be a game where the Browns just run away with it and they're able to give it to Chubb and Hunt, 50 times. And finally, I think he's going to be low owned. The combo of the matchup, we talked about the Texans are 4th versus QBs on DK. That's not really about the Texans' ability to stop the pass. It's just they're so bad against the run. And then the other thing is people don't want to start a rapist. So you got 2 things going for you there. I think he's going to be low owned. And I think he's got a chance to be a real boom play. You can, pair him with, if Njoku plays Njoku, you can pair him with Cooper. I think there's some cheap options. And again, I think if he comes out and plays the way I think he will, this is going to be the cheapest he's going to be the rest of the season. Bargain tier. Our Lord and Savior, Mike White, 5,400. Last week at 4,900. Man, I know some people thought I was insane that I was all in him. I was a big Mike White fan last year. I was really impressed with what he did. The Jets are just an offense begging for just something other than Zach Wilson back there, basically. He only went up $500 despite scoring 27 points. He's facing a Vikings D that just made Mac Jones look like Tom Brady last week. Jones scored his most points he has all season, 26.28. The Vikings have allowed 20-plus points to the opposing QBs in 5 of their last 6. And again, the White Wilson stack is by far my favorite this week. It's super cheap. It's a game, again, that I think is going to be higher scoring. You're going to see a lot of points in that. And, I mean, we've talked about this on the pod. When these guys give you an advantage, I think a lot of people look at, well, they'll be high on, so, why take it? Take it. Take it. When there's somebody this cheap that has got such a great matchup, is obviously in a good situation with the weapons that he has around him, take it. And once it busts, then we can move on, or his price gets too expensive. But if they're only going to up him $500 to where he's still one of the cheapest QBs, and I think he's got one of the best matchups, roll with it all day. Joe, you're the guest. Go ahead. Who's your bargain tier?
I just want to say I agree fully with that, because I get so annoyed on Twitter when people are like, oh, but he's chalk. I don't care. He's going to score me points. Let him score me points. Let me have chalk. I'll beat you elsewhere.
Right.
But my bargain play, and we've already talked about him a little bit, is Trevor Lawrence. Is 5,900. I just like the fact that, like you said, both of these defenses are bad. When it comes to passing DVOA, the one side with the Lions is 19th. The Jaguars is the 30th. That means there's going to be points galore in this game here. And I think both quarterbacks are going to go off. I think receivers are going to go off. I think the slate has a lot of games that has the potential for over in it. And I just like what he did last game. That was a big statement game there. What he did, he could throw, he could run a little. He's got the weapons with Kirk. They finally moved Zay Jones to the outside and down the field a little bit, which I thought was very important because that's what he's actually good at. And let's just say if Jeff Okudah doesn't play, because all he has is one limited practice that he's logged so far in this, then it's going to get even scarier for Trevor Lawrence in the sense that he might blow up. He could 5 times that salary with this price point. So I think this is just a game I really want to target. And if you'll notice, there's kind of a trend down the sheet that I might have just gotten stuck on this game a little bit. And there's like 4 or 5 players. So I'm not a Lions fan. I'm not a Jaguars fan. I just like the situation.
And that's always the best thing. Not to mention, when your teammates are coming out and saying that he didn't get a rookie season because of the coach. I know that's something we've all joked about, that, Urban Meyer was so bad that this is really his first season. His teammates are coming out and saying that, which they know more about than we do.
All I know is that everybody would show up to Trevor Lawrence's birthday party. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Joe, who you got for your bargain tier? I know it's one of your favorites.
Very much speaking my language here, Joe, bringing up the DVOA. I'm all about DVOA all the time. And just on this matchup, I like Jared Goff, 5,300 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, the 30th DVOA, if people know, Football Outsiders waits for the competition that you're up against. So they factor in that, like, hey, they played the Colts twice, who are awful this year. They've played the Texans. They played the Denver Broncos, who are somehow the worst offense in the NFL. And keep in mind, this is the 25th ranked defense against quarterbacks on DK. They didn't give up a passing touchdown in 3 of the first 5 weeks. This is a defense completely trending in the wrong direction. 6 straight games giving up a passing touchdown. 3 of those times was multiple scores. The times it wasn't, they were against the Giants, who have a mash unit, a wide receiver. The Broncos, again, the worst offense in the NFL. And the Ravens, who are also basically a mash unit, a wide receiver. So they got shredded by the Raiders. Kansas City, maybe that's not so bad. But when you gave up 3 touchdowns and nearly 400 yards to this season's Indianapolis Colts and Matt Ryan, it's not a great sign. This defense is bad. Jared Goff, obviously, he's a roller coaster this year. He's as many 20-point games as under 10-point games. That's why he's priced below Mike White. But I'll take the risk against this team in, spoiler alert for one of the guys you're going to talk about. I mean, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think you're right. He's going to feast in this game. I'm with you all the way. This is an explosive game. You could make a lineup with a lot of these guys, and not a lot of them are high priced, and you could do really well.
That means this game's going to be 10-9 because we keep talking about this game. So
no, it happened earlier this year with the Seahawks-Cardinals, right, Joe?
Seahawks-Cardinals, the first time they played, I think I mentioned like 6 of their guys, and it was like 17-13. So
yeah, I got a bad feeling about it.
We're unjinxable. I'm saying it.
Moving on. Now you're
that's
really
right. Bring it.
for
Bring
it.
it.
That's like calling a perfect game, man. Like,
that's all right. With this triad, I'm willing to take the shot. We're gonna do it. Moving on to running backs, expensive tier. Joe, I always go cheaper at back if I can. I just feel like this year the running backs are just a little bit more hit or miss. It seems like the expensive ones, except for the guy that you have, who I think is just automatic always. But so I've tried to stay under 7K, then spend that money on receiver and quarterback this year. So I'm going Aaron Jones as my expensive 6,900 at Chicago. He's averaging 21 points per game over the last 6. Only 5 running backs are averaging more points over their last 3. And he scored 18 or more in 4 of his last 6. So the Jones that I expected all preseason, I unfortunately will admit that I had him ranked as the 3rd running back preseason coming into the NFL this year. That has not worked out for fantasy, but he is coming along to see what we saw. After only catching 11 passes first 4 games, which is the main reason I was so high on him, he has 26 over his last 6 games. So he's a lot more involved in the passing game. Obviously, that raises his floor, which makes him a lot more appealing. And the Bears, in their last 6 games, have allowed 28 receptions to opposing running backs and 9 scores. In just the last 3 weeks, they've given up 96 carries for 402 yards on the ground. I think Rodgers is banged up, and that is obviously going to mean there's a good chance the Packers lean more heavily on the run game, especially against the Bears offense that if Fields plays, maybe they can keep up. If they can't, I don't really expect them to at all. We saw what a Trevor Siemian-led Bears team was last week. I think Aaron Jones at his price range has got a real boom potential, and it's why he's my expensive tier running back. Joe, why don't you go and talk about, real quickly, Eckler. Do you consider him a stack with Herbert? Because we've talked about that this season, where you stack Herbert and Eckler together and consider that the stack. Or do you stack a receiver with them too?
I've had times where I've like double stacked and put the receiver in Eckler, and I consider that a double stack. But I have stacked him with just Eckler, and the reason being is Eckler already has 80 receptions.
Right.
And that, if it's like normal level of receptions, maybe I wouldn't consider that. But 80 receptions, I feel like I kind of have to consider that a stack for me, just because of how much he's been checking down with the ribs and everything. But in this matchup, I love him so much. Like I said, 80 receptions. I think he had like a 23% target share last week without Mike Williams there. It was wild. But he gets the Raiders now. And I'm going to read off a few stats. I'm going to look dead at it because I don't want to get a single stat wrong because I thought it was nuts. This is against pass catching like running backs here. And the Raiders are allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to running backs. And then they're one of the worst, like I said, against the pass catching running backs because they're allowing the 3rd most receptions, the most receiving yards, and the 3rd highest receiving touchdowns to running backs. And you're playing a guy who has 80 receptions as a running back. I just feel like it's all too perfect. Last week, I made this mistake with Ken Walker, and I was like, oh, he's really good on the ground, and then maybe he'll just get a few things because they're so bad at pass catching. I made that mistake. I think I was a week too early with that thought process. I think it works here.
I love it. I mean, we always talk about you don't have to twist our arm for Eckler ever because he's basically the DK cheat code. When you're getting a full point per reception, I mean, I always say if I have like 8,500 left over, the first guy I'm usually looking at is Eckler. Joe, you're going back to the well, right?
Yeah, same game, different running back. I mean, he's probably going to be high owned, but I don't care. It's Josh Jacobs, 7,900 against the Chargers.
50 points.
Yeah, he actually lost me money because one of my lineups that didn't have him in it was in the money until that touchdown run in overtime, and it knocked me out. So it was bittersweet, but I appreciate being proven right. So opportunity share, so that's percentage of the backfield's carries plus targets. First in the NFL, 83%. So higher than Saquon. First in rushing yards. That's pretty good. What I really love about this matchup, especially though, he's first, according to Player Profiler, in yards created. So that's yards after what was blocked for. That's a great sign, especially when we go to Football Outsiders. We look at adjusted line yards, which is their stat that's trying to basically remove the running back from the stat. We're taking out a lot of the big runs. We're weighting them down. Vegas, first in adjusted line yards on offense. Chargers, 28th on defense. So this is an offensive line that's moving people off the ball. It's a defensive line, front seven that, I mean, hey, They were awful last year. They're awful this year. It hasn't changed. And Josh Jacobs is playing as well or better than any other running back in the NFL right now. So I'm all in on him. You can't go wrong in this game. Choose either running back. They're going to give you 20-plus points. It's just a question of which one of them potentially scores 40 points.
I've been shocked how much Jacobs has caught passes this year. Like I'm going through his game by game. I think he has like 4 games with 6 or more
like
receptions.
I said, number one in opportunity across the board. Like he is the back.
I mean, last year I think he had like 50-something receptions, and I remember writing about this in the offseason that like the Raiders aren't signing him back. They didn't take that option. They're going to run him until the wheels fall off, because why not? McDaniel, whichever one he is with the S or no S, who the hell knows? But he comes from Bill Belichick, who does that to running backs every single time. So I was like, oh, this guy's going to get so many touches this year, and I'm so mad I didn't play him last week, and I switched to Kenneth Walker. Like, it was like, oh, it did okay, and then you get like, what, 50 points on DraftKings, and you cry about it for like a week at least.
I was all over Walker too, so I feel you there. The median tier, I'm disappointed in myself because both the Joes have Dameon Pierce, and the number one Dameon Pierce fan club guy, myself, does not. So why don't y'all guys go over why Dameon is the guy to go this week with?
You want me to go first, Joe?
Yeah, you're the guest.
Yeah,
man.
Okay.
Joe.
I don't know. There's too many Joes. You know?
That's true.
for me, it's more of just a volume play. Like Rex Burkhead, he's missing practice. He isn't going to be there. And it's a volume play against a defense that just struggles against the running back. Like Houston's worse against the running backs, but Cleveland's just as bad. They've given up 16 total touchdowns, passing and rushing to running backs, 13 of them on the ground. It fits right into what Dameon Pierce does. And I don't even know, like, I know Benjamin's there. Not worried about him. I think it's who's the other guy? Dare. He's there. Like, I'm not worried about Dare taking things away from him.
I can't say his name. I'm not worried about him.
I'm not saying his name because then the furniture is going to start floating in the house. I'm not doing that. Yeah, I got enough stuff going on in this damn house. But yeah, I'm not worried about anybody behind him. Rex Burkhead's missing the game. Kyle Allen is an average quarterback at best, and that's being nice about it. So you might as well hand that ball off 20 times, maybe even 25. Let this guy go. I don't even care. 25 for 100 and a touchdown. But at that price, I'm not that mad at it. At 5,900 against this defense, I think that's kind of like his floor, that he's going to get 20 touches, 100 yards, maybe a touchdown.
Yeah, and the thing I like about this one, too, is it's the total reverse of the Josh Jacobs one, because his last 2 weeks have been awful. Nothing has happened. 8 points.
He's going to be low.
Literally on DK, the 2 worst games he's had. So I think that scares some people away. I'm with you, Keith. I think this game probably ends up being at least close into the fourth quarter. And a big part of that is I think they're going to have success running the ball against this Cleveland defense that's awful. The Chargers, who I just mentioned, they're dead last in yards per rush allowed. 31st is the Cleveland Browns. So
yeah.
Great call.
This is the game plan. If they want to win this, pound the rock with Dameon Pierce.
He told us like week 4 on the one of our morning shows that they were bad, and that was really before anybody knew it. And then that Falcons game happened where Patterson got hurt, and then we had literally our backup and a guy that I didn't even know as a Falcons fan was on the roster. Both rushed for like 70 yards and a touchdown in the second half. It's like, oh, this run defense is really bad. Again, I'm disappointed for not going with Dameon Pierce because he's my guy, but give me Jamal Williams, 6,000 versus Jacksonville. He scored double figures, 5 straight games. He's a sure thing to score a touchdown in fantasy at running back. In those 5 games I mentioned, he scored 7 touchdowns. He's seen 23 red zone touches in just the last 5 games. He leads the NFL in red zone touches now at 41, has 16 from the goal line or closer. The Jags have given up 8 rushing touchdowns on the year. More importantly, their defense is just giving up points. They've given up 20 points or more in 6 straight, an average of 25.3 points per game in that time. If the Lions are going to score 20-plus points, which I think we all think that might become a sneaky shootout game, it's hard to believe Williams does not get at least 1 touchdown. And again, a guy that's getting that many red zone, targets, if say Amon St. Brown gets tackled a few times on the 3 or 4. Now we're talking about Williams having one of those games that drives, I know, me crazy when I'm playing against fantasy where he has like 19 carries, 60 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Next thing you know, he scored 20 points. So give me Jamal Williams for my median tier. The bargain tier, I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt, 4,800. Nick Chubb is obviously the very appealing play. I mean, the Texans run D at this point is just, I mean, they're a friend of the pod, or at least, again, as I tell people, a friend of our wallets, because you just pick against the Texans, you win money. But I think Watson's going to be the focal point in this first game back, making Chubb just a little too pricey for where he's at, even in this great matchup. Obviously, he'll be high owned as well. So give me Hunt at almost half the price. He's been a disappointment, don't get me wrong, to say the least this season, but nothing better for a struggling back than to face this Texans run D. Hunt has still seen at least 6 touches in his last 5 games. Most of his best games this season have come versus bottom third run defenses. He has 7 games with 7 or more points, 5 with 9 points or more, and then obviously he had the big 23-point game week 1. So he does have that potential to give you real boom at this price. And he has not seen a red zone touch the last 3 games. That's obviously bad. But in that period, Chubb's only seen 6. So it's not like they're really going away from giving Hunt the ball in the red zone. The Browns just haven't gotten the red zone a lot. So for the season, Chubb still only has 11 more red zone touches than Hunt, which is just mind-boggling as a Georgia fan who knows how good Nick Chubb is in the red zone, but that's the way they decided to coach. And I do think Deshaun Watson is going to make the receiving part of Hunt more appealing, just because he has historically thrown a lot to running back and tight ends in his career. Somebody gets rid of the ball quickly. I just think Hunt at 4,800 versus just a dreadful Houston run defense. He's going to be low owned and has a chance to have a boom game. And hey, let's say I'm wrong and Cleveland gets up big. Kareem Hunt could end up getting a lot of garbage carries against an awful defense. And then that's even better for this play. So Kareem Hunt is my guy. Joe the Brain, who you got this week, buddy, for your bargain tier?
I am going against my New York Giants and taking Brian Robinson, 5,300.
It's the hat.
Brian Robinson.
That big hat.
Brian Robinson. Yeah, that big hat, man. Big shoes, big hat. He's feeling it all. He's doing it. Up until last week, it kind of been 3 yards in a cloud of dust for him so far, but he was getting the carries, which is why he was playable.
He hadn't faced the Falcons either.
Yeah, he faced your Falcons. Suddenly, he looks like the guy that people were hyping up in the preseason before. Again, this is
he was shot a few months ago.
So it makes sense that he's starting to look better as the season goes here. 18 carries, 105 yards, and a little receiving game too. It caught a touchdown, which generally is the Antonio Gibson part of this team. But mostly, though, it's because he's facing my Giants, who have kind of skated by being good in the red zone and hiding the fact that this is a legitimately bad defense. 4 of the last 6 weeks, they've given up at least 120 yards to opposing backfields on the ground. 5 of the 6 weeks, they've given up a touchdown. Last 2, Lions and Cowboys, they each got $150, 5 total touchdowns on the ground. So this defense is having a lot of trouble to stop anyone on the ground. If Washington's smart, you don't want Taylor Heineke to end up in 3rd and longs facing a bunch of exotic Wink Martindale blitzes. So you're pounding the rock, and there's no reason not to. Again, Chargers, 5.6 yards per carry allowed. Right next to the Cleveland Browns at 5.2, my New York Giants. This is a bad defense. This is a running back getting into form at a really nice price.
I love that. Joe, you know you're officially a friend of the pod when you start picking on the Falcons. That is what Joe Matz does every week, and to a lot of success, I'd like to add. Who's your running back?
I like the Brian pick, by the way, the Brian Robinson pick a lot, because I was just reading something about Antonio Gibson dealing with injury too, so he might not even be fully healthy. So I got to look more into that. But my play matters a little bit on the injury report as well, and it's Jaylen Warren. If Najee Harris, who did not practice today, is out, I feel like at 4,900 versus this Falcons defense, for the load that Jaylen Warren will get because he's been practicing all week, I just think it's wild. And let's not forget, I know everybody liked Benny Snell, but you know who showed up on the injury report today? Benny Snell. So if Najee Harris is out and Benny Snell, the waiver wire darling of the week for some reason, is also injured, I feel like it's Jaylen Warren, and it's a bottom 10 run defense. I'm sorry, man. Like that's I know
they're terrible.
Trying to be nice about it, but they're just bad at it. They're just bad at it, yet somehow they win games, stay within the spread. They always piss me off when I'm betting against them. But I just think this is just too simple that if Najee Harris is out, that volume you could get at $4,900 on like DraftKings, that's wild to me. It's almost impossible to find that.
Not to mention, just remember, this is the same guy that the team was publicly saying Najee Harris is going to lose carries to him because he's that talented. So I'm with you. I don't get the Snell thing. If Harris ends up missing or is just limited, I think Warren is a really big boom play potential. The receivers. I know everybody's going to want to talk about Jamar Chase, but my expensive tier is the other guy. Joe Matz it's your guy. You pick T. Higgins all the time. T. Higgins, 7,200. He's got 9 straight games with double-digit points, which is really outrageous. He's exploded, obviously, the last 2 weeks. Now, granted, that was without Chase. He scored at least 27 points the last 2 outings. And again, I know the tendency is going to be to stack Burrow with Chase because Chase, he had 4 touchdowns and like 300 yards in 2 games last year versus this Kansas City secondary. But I think Higgins is the play, and not just because he's $700 cheaper, but also because he's not going to be on any kind of snap count, which I do believe Jamar Chase, if they're smart, they're not going to go full throttle with this guy. Obviously, they want to use him, but they don't want to re-injure him. And the great thing is, the Chiefs would be crazy to not make Chase the number one objective to slow down. And that's going to divert most of the attention to Chase and away from Higgins. Again, Chase had 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in the game. However, Higgins had over 160 yards and a touchdown in the 2 games last season. More importantly, the bigger game came in the second game after Chase had gone wild. And obviously in that second game, the Chiefs were like, okay, we've got to slow down Chase. That allowed Higgins to go over 100 yards. He had a touchdown. I think he saw 12 targets in that game. He's seen at least 6 targets in each game this season since week 1. And number 2 receivers have had a ton of success versus the Chiefs. Just in the last 6 weeks, Gabe Davis, 3 receptions, 74 yards, a touchdown. Brandon Ayuk, 8 receptions for 72 yards. Zay Jones, 8 receptions for 68 yards. Josh Palmer, 8 receptions, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, I talked about how much I love Burrow this week. I like the price that you're getting on a Burrow-Higgins stack. It's going to be just over $13,000. You can't beat that. And again, you think it's going to be a shootout. So give me T. Higgins as my expensive tier wide receiver. Joe, you're the guest. Go ahead, Joe. You got Amon-Ra, right?
Yep, I got the Sun God, and when I pick my players, I have this thing where I want to build the narrative of the game. Like, how do I think it's all going to play out? And I never had such an easy time figuring out a player like I do Amon-Ra. There's going to be 10 targets. There's going to be 7 receptions. There's going to be 70 yards. Now he's got a touchdown. He broke that streak that he was having between the injury and everything. And we've talked enough about the defenses that I'm not going to get back into that again. But the Jaguars defense is bad. Like we said before, Jared Goff loves him some Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra is pretty much that offense because, you can't really rely on Swift anymore right now at the moment with the injury and not being played and everything like that. Jamal Williams is nice, but like you said, he's down at the goal line with 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. Amon-Ra's that guy in between. And if he gets the touchdown on top of that, he's got the potential to just break the ceiling for your lineup. So I'm putting him in there every time, especially at his price. I still don't think it's high enough for him. And I put him in there every time, and I know I'm getting 14 or more points every single time.
Joe, you got AJ?
Yeah, I have AJ Brown. But first, I just want to say I absolutely co-sign both those picks. Unsurprisingly, considering I have Joe Burrow and Jared Goff as 2 of my quarterbacks. But yeah, I love this wide receiver slate. But yeah, I'm going AJ Brown. I feel like he's due for that explosion game because it hasn't happened since week 8 against Pittsburgh. Last week he was battling a flu and he still caught a touchdown, gave us 13.6 points. But against this Titan defense, I like the possibility for that explosion game because DK actually undersells how bad the Titans have been against wide receivers because they're 28th on DK. But that's the product of guys hitting that perfect 100-yard bonus because they're second to last in every other thing I see as far as fantasy goes. This team gives it up to wide receivers. And I think Tennessee is going to score some points in this game. I think actually in our pool, where we make all of our picks on these games. I took the Titans to pull the upset here, which actually just means I'm more bullish than on the receivers in this game. I think one of those guys, AJ Brown or Devonta Smith, one of them will go off in this game. I'm playing the odds that it's AJ because I think, he is ultimately the alpha in this offense. And on that PFF wide receiver corner matchup, perfect 100 out of 100. He is the highest rated advantage according to PFF's numbers this week. Nah. So I'm willing to roll the dice on that.
I like that play. And Devonta Smith today, I was reading, is dealing with a groin injury at the moment too. So that's I like the AJ Brown thing a lot. And that's not just because I'm an Eagles fan.
I'm with you.
That's true. I do always pick someone from our guests.
You're a suck up, Joe. We know that.
I don't even know their teams going.
Yeah, you do. You do research. I can see you. You're Joe the Brain Match. You're doing research on this stuff. I have AJ Brown as my expensive flex. So just to add, Joe, I literally, not kidding you, wrote down Brown is due for a breakout game. He hasn't scored more than 16 points since his huge game versus Pittsburgh in Week 8. And the Titans are literally a treasure trove for wide receivers. They've given up 8 touchdowns to receivers in their last 7 games. 12 receivers in their last 4 games have a reception of 23 yards or more. I say this every time because it was such a great call by you. De'Ami Brown. You gave De'Ami Brown on this pod, and I was going, Joe, what are you smoking tonight? And then he goes out and has 3 receptions for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns versus defense. And again, I'm with you. Revenge game. If you don't think AJ Brown's like, oh, you traded me for another 17 pick, and I'm not going to go out and just absolutely torch this terrible secondary.
Oh yeah,
I would be shocked if he doesn't. I think Brown has a monster game, which the great part about him is he is a true guy who can have monster games. Like we talk about receivers that, they can score 20, 30. AJ Brown can score 40, 50. We've seen him do it. I would not be shocked if he ends up getting that done this week. So moving on to median, we talk about price again, just like with Mike White. Garrett Wilson at 5,300 is so freaking disrespectful. It's ridiculous. Wilson has scored 17.9 points or more in 3 of his last 4. Doing that in 2 of those games with Zach Wilson, which that means those points should count double at this point. We were giddy about the improvement that we saw at QB last week with White at the helm. Wilson said, I'm giddy too, as he had his highest scoring output of the season, turning 8 targets into 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. In the 4 games Wilson has played without Zach Wilson at quarterback this year, Garrett is averaging 20 points per game on DraftKings, has caught 23 passes for 309 yards and 4 touchdowns. Again, that's with Joe Flacco and Mike White. So not looking good for Zach Wilson and Jets fans in that situation, but it is good for Garrett Wilson and people that select him this week on DraftKings. He would be my favorite play this week at the price, no matter who he was facing. But he is facing a Vikings team that has really struggled with number 1 receivers. Just a reminder that Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyreek Hill all caught 12 passes versus this secondary for a combined 464 yards. I'd be shocked if Wilson doesn't catch at least 5 passes. I think he's going to top 100 yards. I think he gets at least 1 score. And again, it makes his high ownership mute. When you can put White and Wilson again together for what, 10,700? That's how I'm starting every lineup. Then I can have Eckler. I can throw in A.J. Brown. I can do a lot of things with that. And I feel very confident because Minnesota is so bad against the pass, and they score points. So it's a win-win. It's like Minnesota scores points, and then therefore their bad defense has to go back out there, and the offense has to, on the other side, keep trying to score against them. So I am all over that play. Joe, you got Christian Watson, who I know we've all got. So that is truly the trifecta today. Why don't you tell us why you like him?
So I kind of have this rule about fantasy and DFS, and it's first, who did the Detroit Lions play? And I go through that game and I pick a few people. Then I'm like,
Chris.
Who do the Bears play? And I go to them because that defense, especially since trading away their stars, is atrocious. Ever since they traded away their stars, the lowest scoring opponent has had 27 points, your Atlanta Falcons. Everybody else has scored more than that. This is the guy that Aaron Rodgers trusts this guy now. You've seen it the last couple of weeks. You've also saw his talent on that pass from Jordan Love, that he can catch it and just get away from everybody. And here's the thing for me, like, if Mike White, and this is no hate on Mike White, but if Mike White could do what he did against the Bears in a rain game, what the hell is Aaron Rodgers going to do to them? So I think for 5,200, this might be more of like a little bit
Jordan
more of
Love
a GPP.
coming in and doing something.
Yeah, I like the Jordan Love thing. I don't really care for Christian Watson. I don't think I have to worry regardless because I think they both know, get this guy the ball. This guy has speed. It's almost like a little baby Megatron out there. And I know that's really high praise, but I was kind of too hype on him when he came out of the draft. But I call him little baby Megatron. You give him the ball, he's humongous. He can out-jump you. He can outrun you. And this is the Bears defense that might be down a safety. I haven't kept an eye on that truly yet. So that's also a problem. I just go against the Lions, go against the Bears defense. Your lineup has a very safe floor if you do that.
Yeah, he's my median flex as well. So just to add to that, I mean, a guy scores 7 touchdowns in 3 games. I think he should be more than $5,200.
Yes.
That's just, again, if they're going to give it to you, take it. He's seen 20 targets in those 3 games. He scored 80 points over those 3 games. And I mean, to your point, the Bears D, they're awful. They threw up a white flag on this season defensively when you trade away Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn. So, Joe, I know you got him. What is he your flex or is he?
He is my bargain wide receiver at 5,200. I mean, for me, I'm assuming Aaron Rodgers probably plays, and in his last 5 games against the Bears, he's thrown multiple touchdowns in all of those games. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers, as he told the Bears last year, he owns them. And yeah, you have a receiver who's catching a touchdown or multiple touchdowns in like every single game now. So. And we only need 1 to justify him at this price. Like, we're good if he catches 1. If he catches 2, then now we're talking about we're in the money. So, yeah, against this Bears defense, there's no reason to fade him right now.
Yep.
All right, your median tier, Joe, is Terry F1 McLaurin, right?
That's right. Terry, F1 and or Scary McLaurin. This is the 3rd straight week I've picked him. In the last 2 weeks, he's failed to break 10 both times. So 3rd time is hopefully
him, Joe. You're killing me.
Giants fan. I hope to be wrong yet again because I want us to win this game because I want to make the playoffs.
Son of a bitch. You went for the double jinx.
Yeah.
But
I like it, though. I like it.
Game, respect, game. Yeah, no, I for real.
But I also like it, too, because, again, he's coming off not great games. If you're just looking at that DK rank, like, oh, the Giants are 4th against receivers, not the time to play Terry McLaurin. Adoree Jackson is out. We're playing Foster Moreau and, who even is our other corner on the outside? Nick McLeod. I don't even know who that guy is. He doesn't usually line up in the slot, but if he does, Darnay Holmes is the 119th out of 121 ranked quarterbacks on PFF.
So, yeah,
it's rough out there. Like the reason that we're so low against guys is we've like been lucky because that's what it is about stopping teams in the red zone. We haven't given up a lot of receiving touchdowns, but I mean, if you watch the Thanksgiving game, which I think had like the highest Thanksgiving ratings in like years, Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb were eating because Wink Martindale loves the blitz. And if that blitz doesn't get there real quick, guys are running open. And Terry McLaurin is a guy who runs open against good defenses. Again, the last really good game he had before I started picking him every week was against Darius Slay, who is an all-pro cornerback. So against our hodgepodge, I like the odds that he can do some real damage.
Yeah.
I really love that, Joe. You're using the pod for new things, and I respect that. So, moving on to the bargain tier, I had a really hard time choosing between Deontay Johnson and George Pickens because you got to pick a receiver versus the Falcons at this point. If not, you're missing free points. But Pickens is $100 cheaper, so I'm gonna go with him. And if you're asking me how bad are the Falcons versus the pass, they're still 29th in the most points allowed to wide receivers and 23rd to opposing QBs. In the last 3 games, their opponents have thrown in a combined 60 times against them. So, I mean, it's pitiful. Like, we're still that bad despite teams being like, we only got to throw it 20 times to beat you. Again, Pickens is $100 cheaper. He scored double figures in 3 straight. He's seen 16 targets to Johnson's 18. And the thing I love about Pickens is the big play. Obviously, we've seen that. The Falcons have allowed a passing play of 25 yards or more in every single game this season. So they're going to give up a big passing play. That's a guarantee. Pickens has a reception of 30 yards or more in 3 of the last 5. I'm going to be shocked if Pickens does not have a 25-plus yard touchdown against this Falcons team. They're that bad in the secondary. I don't care if Terrell's back or not. And the great thing about Atlanta is we score points. So, again, we don't have to worry about Pittsburgh getting into this, like, run-heavy style offense. They're going to have to throw it a little bit. I don't even really hate a Pickens and Johnson in your lineup because I think they both can do damage this week. But if I have to pick one, which I do for my bargain, I'm going to go with Pickens because he's a little bit cheaper and the big play ability. Joe, you had Christian Watson, which we went over. So, Joe, why don't you round out our bargain receivers?
So I love that Pickens thing, by the way. I just made a bet for Pickens' longest reception because, like you said, 3 out of the last 5 games, crazy numbers. So I'm all for that. So if I'm going to save some money on wide receiver, I'm going with Zay Jones. I've talked, like I said, just kind of a trend. Go against the Detroit Lions. They're a little better against the run the last couple games. So to go against the Detroit Lions, I want to go against them in the pass here. And Zay Jones at 4,900. Not going to get into why the defense is so bad. We've talked about that. If Okuda's out, it's even better for me. We've talked about that too. We have a guy here, Zay Jones, where they brought him back to what he's good at, deeper passes down the field the last 2 games. And he's had 24 targets in those last 2 games. He might get another 10 in this game with the way that I think this game is going to be throwing points across the board like a ping pong table. So at 4,900, it doesn't take much for me to justify spending that. And if I want to go heavy on backs, let's say I just run into like a Eckler, Chubb, Henry in the flex type thing, then I got to save somewhere, and this is where I would save.
I like that. And I think that's been, again, the way to either go, at least recently, is either you take 2 really expensive running backs or you take the really expensive quarterback and receiver, and then you try to build around that. But I've learned in the last year that that's really what you got to do. You got to start with the more expensive guys that you know you like and then kind of build around it because they're going to score the points. Moving on to tight ends. Stop me if you heard this before, but I'm going to go with Pat Freiermuth because he's facing the Atlanta Falcons. He scored 6.9 points or more in 5 straight, 15 or more in 3 of his last 7. And the Falcons, Joe the Brain knows this stat, Joe. I bet you don't. That the Falcons have allowed an opposing tight end to finish top 12 in DK scoring in 9 of their 12 games. If you remove the Panthers, who they don't throw to tight ends, so they really shouldn't count for this, it's 9 out of 10 games. And in the one game that they didn't finish top 12, that tight end finished 13th. So the Falcons are really bad versus tight ends. And again, because of the injuries at running back and the fact that the Falcons can score points, I expect the Steelers to throw more, meaning potential big gains for Freiermuth and the Steelers receivers. And again, Freiermuth at 4,300 and the Falcons being so bad against tight ends, I'm actually thinking about having some lineups where Freiermuth will be my second tight end I start, and maybe I start Kelsey or one of those other guys. That obviously Andrews, it's a little bit more predictable, but then I can still get that boom out of Freiermuth in the flex for super cheap at 4,300. But the Falcons are bad against tight ends. I expect the Steelers passing game to be doing very well this week. And for me to be pulling my hair out because that's what happens every Sunday. So, Joe, you got Travis Kelce, right? The guy to have.
Yes, I like the self-abuse you give yourself on this pod, by the way, because that's like the 9th pick against your team, and I think that's incredible.
It's a coping mechanism at this point.
Yeah, I like it. But honestly, expensive play, tight end, this isn't going to be a really informative section here. It's Travis Kelce or bust, basically. You either go Travis Kelce or you throw a dart and hope that one of these big lugs fall into the end zone. But we're in a game. Them against the Bengals, like we said, we could see 30-plus points on each side of it. The number 1 target for Patrick Mahomes is Travis Kelce. If I'm having a Mahomes lineup, I'm probably having Kelce in that lineup with them together. There's just not much to go about it. It's Travis Kelce. Ding dong. It's simple.
I completely agree. I argue people that he should be looked at as a receiver, right? Is that the way you look at it? Because I look at his price compared to other receivers, and that's where a lot of times he's an automatic start for me, is if he's cheaper than, say, Diggs or, whoever has a tough matchup, it's like you're getting –
I'll go there.
You're getting the one receiver. Joe, you're going with our boy George Kittle. He hasn't been on the pod in a while, so it's good to have him back.
No, it's not been the most exciting year for George Kittle, although it's more or less ticked up the second half of the season so far. For the last 6 games, he's hit double digits. 2 of those were 20-point games, but also 2 of the last 3 weeks under 10. So, he's hit or miss. That's why he's down here at 5,000 and, way below the Travis Kelce's of the world, which is literally just Travis Kelce. But I love him against this Miami defense. Miami, bottom 5 in yards and receptions allowed, actually 31st in receptions allowed. And only 2 teams have given up more touchdowns to tight ends this year. 3 straight games, they have given up a receiving touchdown. TJ Hawkinson's last game with the Lions, he only caught 3 passes, went for 80 yards against this defense. It's not a great defense. It's an especially bad defense against tight ends. And I think this is kind of the underrated potential shootout. Obviously, San Francisco is a very good defense, but that Miami offense has been a well-oiled machine as long as Tua's head has not been damaged. So, yeah, I think there could be some points in this game, and I'll roll the dice on George Kittle at 5,000. Now, again, like if you look at the PFF tight end advantage, Freiermuth is second highest, Kittle is 4th highest, and then Travis Kelce is number 1 because I think he's number 1 every single week because that's
he's got his own category,
right? He's definitely number 1 in my heart. So.
Yeah,
but yeah, like this is real opportunity to I think pair Travis Kelce with, like you said, you can play 2 tight ends because there's some value in some of these guys versus wide receivers and running backs at these prices. So I'd be happy to throw Kelce in with either of the 2 guys we just talked about.
And Joe, I apologize. You had Pat Freiermuth for your median.
I did have Pat Freiermuth because I am contractually obligated to choose a player against the Falcons.
Fuck you, Joe.
Every single week.
It's funny when I do it. It's not funny when you do it.
I mean, when I do two guys against my Giants, I think I'm allowed to.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, someone will go off against the Falcons because someone always does. And Pat Freiermuth, I think, is a really good bet to be that guy this week.
Yeah.
He's very heavily involved since Pickens has been the QB. My median has been one of Joe's plays the last couple of weeks. I'm finally getting on board with Foster Moreau, 3,600 versus the Chargers. He's averaging basically the same points as Mark Andrews over the last 3 games, which is just mind-boggling, and only a point less than George Kittle's. The tight end position is so fucked up this year. Both are considerably more expensive, obviously. I'm not sure there's a better snapshot, again, of just the mess that this tight end position is. And that statement right there that Foster Moreau in the last 3 games is right there with George Kittle's and Mark Andrews. However, this price, he's seen 28 targets over the last 5 weeks. I mean, that's all we're asking for, right, from a tight end, is you're going to get at least a chance to score points. He scored 9 or more in 3 of the last 5 and facing a Chargers D that's 24th versus tight ends on DraftKings. He's arguably the number 3 target in an offense that scores points and whose defense can't stop anyone. That's good enough for me at 3,600. So I'm going to go with Foster Moreau for my median tier. Who do you got, Joe, for yours?
So I stuck with the Kansas City Chiefs game, but I went to the other side with Hayden Hurst. And like I said, if it's not Travis Kelce, I'm hoping somebody just falls into the end zone. And I pulled up the top 10 PPR tight ends the other day for a conversation with my friend. And lo and behold, I see stupid Hayden fucking Hurst in there. Why? I don't know. But he's in there, and it pisses me off. And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know what? For this game, I actually kind of like it. You got to worry about Jamar Chase if he plays. You got to worry about T. Higgins if he plays. Kind of got to worry about Joe Mixon if he's playing. We still got to figure all that out. Hayden Hurst could slip around in this potential shootout. And let's not forget that in the beginning of the season, it was just touchdowns against the Chiefs when it was tight ends. They started that year off giving up touchdowns to the tight end like crazy. So right now, at this price, at 3,500, just catch 5 balls for 50 yards. I'll be happy with that. Like, because I hate this position. If I'm not picking Kelce, it's my last pick, and I'm like, how much money do I have left? Damn, I'll just go with him. That's usually what I go with when it comes to tight end, because I just absolutely hate this position. I'm usually on Foster Moreau, and he finally worked out for me last week. But I wanted to switch it up a bit. I'm going Hayden Hurst.
The bargain tier, which now we're really getting to the bottom of the barrel. Give me Tyler Conklin, 3,100 at Minnesota. He's yet another player booed. And again, I'm not trying to pick on Zach Wilson, but when all these guys' value go up when your number 2 pick from just last year is not playing. That's not a good sign. But he is another one that is help when Wilson doesn't play. In the 4 games not started by Zach Wilson, he scored 8 or more points in all 4. We'll take that as a tight end in this price range every day of the week. He's averaged actually just under 12 points per game in those 4 games. And he's facing a Vikings team that's given up 4 touchdowns to tight ends in their last 6 games. Conklin last week, 3 catches, 50 yards in the first game with Mike White. And again, I think this Jets-Minnesota game is going to be a shootout. Like, I think it's going to be the sneaky shootout on this slate because the Vikings can't stop anybody, and they just seem destined to win every game by 3 points. The fact that I found out, did you know that they actually, even with their record, they're in the negative column for the point differential for the season, which is ridiculous. How is that possible? How are you 8-2, right? 9-2?
Didn't we? Because we blew them out, and that's,
that's
not the
fair.
only reason. Yeah,
that's fair. Because I'm trying to think, who was their other loss?
Who did they lose to? I don't even remember. I thought I got nothing for you there.
I just don't understand how that happens. It's win some games by some more points is what I'm saying, Minnesota. Come on. Joe, you got to tell me when we share these picks, because once again, I would have told you to say something when I was going over Foster. Go ahead. Is there anything else you want to add?
I mean, I love him because he keeps coming through for me. I picked him 2 of the last 3 weeks. The 2 weeks that I picked him, he scored touchdowns. He's seen a target inside of the 10.
He's anti-Terry McLaurin.
He is the anti-Terry McLaurin. And he's seen a target inside of the 10 all 3 weeks. And so I like that he's seeing the ball at least once a game in the red zone. Again, caught 2 of them. Chargers, I believe they are 26th in yards allowed, 2 tight ends per game. So, yeah, I think this is another game that there's a lot of games that could be shootouts, and this should be one of them. And Foster Moreau, again, he keeps seeing the ball in the red zone. So at this price point, like you said, if we're punting on this position, this is a guy I like to slot in there.
Joe, round out our bargain tier tight ends that nobody really wants to play.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now that these plays I'm about to give you, this is like pray to God, pray to Satan, pray to whoever you got to pray to, because they're just cheap. Their salary, they're saving you some salary. Like, there's nothing really great about them, but it's Logan Thomas at 2,900. If he doesn't play, it's John Bates, who I believe is 2,500. I didn't actually write his thing down because I just don't care enough about either of these guys.
His price anyway.
Yeah, I don't really care about these guys too much, but the Giants are giving up the 7th most receptions to the position. And at this price, I don't need a lot at this price. This price just lets me go and buy the expensive backs. Go and maybe, like you said, put a Kelsey in one, put like a Bates or a Thomas here and just get a few points so I could save up and spend it somewhere else. Like, it's not a pretty play. You're not, and please don't watch this game being like, oh my God, come on, Logan Thomas. Like, just shut it off, watch something else. Like, but at 2,900, at 2,600, because I just pulled it up, either one of them. Logan Thomas, if he plays, is nice. If it's not him, I go down to John Bates. I save a ton of cash that way. I put it somewhere else. My team has a higher potential, in my opinion, if I do that.
And again, I've said this on the pod before. I think the Giants might have the worst inside linebacking core in the NFL. We are down one of our 2 starting safeties. So, yeah, like whoever's out there, you don't have to pay anything for them, and there's a chance they'll slip through and catch a touchdown. So,
damn, you're making it difficult to figure out which players I should play against you guys this week. You ain't got corners that can cover Terry. You ain't got linebackers that can, tackle Robinson. You ain't got anybody to cover tight ends. What the fuck's going on?
And I still picked us to win. So, I don't know what's going on.
You also, though, took the Titans to beat the Eagles. So, I don't really have to say much else about your picks.
Hey, man.
I do want to add, Nate said this, and I missed this when we were talking about Cincy. They've scored 17 straight touchdowns in the red zone, excluding kneel downs.
Wow.
That is why Nate Markham is the man. That is unbelievable. Damn. So Cincy's offense right now is rolling. Joe Burrow is back. The flexes, again, A.J. Brown, I talked about him, so we don't need to go. You guys share, the best play ever because it's Nick Chubb versus the Texans. Whoever wants to just explain
why
that's the easiest play ever.
It's not really complicated. It's Nick Chubb, probably the best pure runner in the NFL. I got the one thing maybe you're afraid of in this game. It's probably the only thing to be afraid of in this game is Deshaun Watson's return kind of wrecks the run pass balance a little bit. But I think Stefanski's a guy who just likes to run the ball, and there's no reason to go against this Texans defense that is just a treasure trove for opposing running backs. I mean, 145 yards per game allowed purely on the ground to opposing backfields. That's the worst in the NFL by 12 yards. They limited the Dolphins to only 56 yards and a touchdown, which, kudos, I guess, because before that, they were on 6 straight games giving up 100 yards on the ground. And one of those, if people might remember, the Tennessee Titans ran for 302 yards on 40 carries. Now, again, Deshaun Watson probably ruins our dreams of that, but he could easily have 25 carries for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns.
5 backs scored 30 points or more versus this defense.
Yeah,
this is the defense to play.
Yeah, they allow the most fantasy points per game, the running backs, the most rushing yards, and the most rushing touchdowns. I mean, what else do I really have to say about this?
Right.
And Nick Chubb
is not complicated.
Is a man's man.
And to me, for the narrative for that game, I have a little bit of a different narrative where they kind of like ease Watson back into playing because it's been 700 something days. And I think they lean on their running backs a bit more. So no matter, even if they don't lean on their running backs, they can get 10 carries and probably still get 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I'm really not worried, regardless of how the narrative works out in that game.
Absolutely. It's the same reason that I had Kareem Hunt as my bargain is give him 8 carries. Who knows what can happen against the Texans defense.
Yep.
The median flex, again, Christian Watson, we already discussed. So Joe, give me some Christian Kirk because he's one of our favorite guys on the pod. He's been so sneaky and underowned all year.
Seriously, I feel like I just focused on one game, but like facing the slot defender, the slot coverage defender of the Lions is just gold to me every single time. Christian Kirk has had 21 targets in those last 2 games. He's tallied 7 games with 9 or more targets. We spoke about the passing defense. We spoke about the DOA. We spoke about the potential shootout. But like that slot corner has just been something I've heard, not just here, not just at like fantasy footballers, not just at fantasy pros, not on the CBS. I hear it everywhere. It's like, see that slot defender? Go after him. And it works every single game. And it's going to work here again. I think this game ends up with high scoring ability in it. And I want somebody tied off to my cheap quarterback of Trevor Lawrence.
Love it. Joe, who you got, buddy?
I have Keenan Allen against the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's a very similar thought process, which is the Raiders have been the worst defense for fantasy against opposing slot receivers. I picked Christian Kirk when he played the Raiders. He had 8 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. I picked Paris Campbell when he played the Raiders. That resulted in 7 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. So Keenan Allen is even better than both of those guys. So I'd say we're looking at a floor of about 7 receptions for 70 yards and a touchdown. That's 20 points. So if my floor feels like 20 points, I'm feeling great. So, yeah. Again, I think this is a shootout. The winner of this game is scoring 30-plus points. I think it could easily be either team. But, again, I love Josh Jacobs. I love Foster Moreau. I love Keenan Allen. Light it up.
Love it.
The Raiders in Vegas, too. What more could you ask for? All right, the bargain tier, and we co-signed on this, Joe. Joe the Brain Mats, not Joe Pepe. I'm upset, though, that I didn't go with Elijah Moore. I've gone with every other Jet, but let's go over Nico Collins real quick. He's seen 26 targets his last 3 games. He scored over 36 points in those. The Texans' passing offense showed signs of life. Kind of, maybe, last week with Kyle Allen at QB. I don't know. I mean, it seemed to be a little bit more interesting. And I just think at this potential, he has some like real boom potential. I mean, the Browns have given up 5 touchdowns to wide receivers just in their last 3 games. And again, I just believe in the narrative this game's going to be close. I know that it doesn't make any sense because the Texans are terrible. And I mean, not that the Browns are great, but the Browns with Deshaun Watson and everything else should be much better. But karma's a mofo, man. And I have a feeling this game is going to come down to the wire. for that to happen, either Cooks or Collins is going to need to have a big game. Collins is cheaper. That's basically why I went there. Joe, give me some more actual data instead of just me rambling on why I like Nico Collins.
One of the things, a lot of the stuff that I look at will have, a rating on the matchups. ESPN has an example of this where they give, a great, strong, shaky, etc. matchup thing for DFS. And his was like good, which is for a guy who's in the like 4,000 range, it's usually not going to be great. And then PFF, they have a DFS lineup optimizer. And I swear, like every week, Nico Collins is like a top 20 play on that. I'm like, really, Nico Collins? And then they also do a blow up thing on PFF every week. And he's been on that list a couple times. I'm like, finally this week, I was like, you know what? Because I have the same thinking on this game where I think it's going to be closer than people expect. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a deeper dive on Nico Collins. And then I actually look at 5 of the last 6 weeks, at least 9.8 points, which means if he gives us that at 4,100, we're not excited. That doesn't win us the week, but it's also like reasonable production at that price point. Like if we do any of these cheap tight ends and they give us 9.8 points, we're like, sure, take it because I'm spending money elsewhere to get all those points. So to me, the fact that his floor actually seems reasonably high, I'm in. Like he's going to be in some lineups because, if he gets 65 yards, 4 receptions and a touchdown, which he's done in the last few weeks, he's had games like that, and he throws in a touchdown, he could get us close to 20 points at this price range. So yeah, I think it's actually relatively low risk with the potential for higher reward.
See, I knew you'd make me sound smarter. Thanks. Joe, tell him why Elijah Moore should be in lineups because I do love this play.
Well, he's 3,700 on DraftKings, so salary saver for me. Yeah, it helps a lot. But we've talked already about Conklin. We talked about Garrett Wilson. We talked about people coming alive with Mike White in a game that we all think is going to throw up more points than what the world is realizing because the Vikings defense isn't that great, but the Vikings offense can throw up points. I just think that at 3,700 with that talent level, with that draft capital, with how he played last week with Mike White, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about spending 3,700 and maybe it not working out for me because there's too much potential for it to work out and so little risk here. So I'm just for 3,700, I'll play it every single time.
And I said this last week. If you look, the entire Elijah Moore hype train started in the games that Mike White started last year. That was when he started putting up these numbers. And unfortunately, he got hurt like 3 games after White also got hurt. But I just think there's a connection between those guys. He said he was going to get the ball more with him at QB, and he scored a touchdown first week. So that's a good start. And again, it's a really talented guy at that price that who knows what the hell is going on there, but they just stopped throwing him the ball. So I'm with you. I think it's for bang for your buck. You can't look at a better place than that. And again, he caught another touchdown with the guy. I think that's 3 out of 5 games now he's caught a touchdown with him. So
I'll take the shot every time, man.
Exactly. The defenses, which we always say, just close your eyes, throw a dart, don't spend a lot of money. I'm going to take Seattle, though. It's my expensive one. The Rams, God almighty. Like, I can't think of a worse Super Bowl defense in modern history. Maybe the Elway Broncos, right, when they won back-to-back and then he retired. That's the only one I can think of. But I think even they were decent that first year after.
I mean, Terrell Davis got hurt early in that season.
Right? Wasn't that the same season?
Brian Greasy played okay, if I remember.
Yeah, like, I
don't remember him being terrible. Yeah. They were better than this.
Right. And, I mean, I know Seattle's defense – man, what a year it's been. Like the worst defense in the history of mankind the first couple of weeks and looked like, oh, wait a minute, this defense is really good. And then now they've gotten torched the last few weeks. I think they're somewhere in the middle, but at 3,600 versus the Rams. And I guarantee it's going to be a home game for Seattle and Los Angeles. Give me the Seahawks for my expensive one. For the median one, I'm going to go with Washington at New York. Sorry, Joe. Washington, I've been saying this now. I think this is the 4th week in a row I've picked them. They've scored 5 or more points now in like 7 straight weeks, 7 or more in like 4 of them. They get after the pass rush. They've been creating turnovers. They don't give up a lot of points, and they're a team that likes to grind it out so that they shouldn't give up a lot of points in yardage. And then for my bargain one, this is no surprise, the Steelers versus the Falcons. I know the Falcons continue to find ways to score and move the ball. I am terrified to see what TJ Watt does against Marcus Mariota. And at this point, I'm just praying for the Ritter watch. Like, just put Desmond Ritter in for God's sake. I'm tired of watching this offense. Like, it's impressive, Arthur Smith. You're a smart dude. I tip my cap to you. Can we please see a team that throws the ball a little bit? So I think the Steelers could end up really messing up this Falcons, particularly because our run game has not looked as good the last couple of weeks, and we have started to turn the ball over. Joe, you're the guest. Why don't you tell me your 3 defenses first?
Like you said, it's almost like kind of throw a dart, hope somebody hits. But what I like to look for is pressures and sacks, because that type of stuff leads to turnovers. So if I was going expensive, which I don't normally do, I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens at 4,000. They're 6th in sacks. They're 5th in interceptions. They're 5th in forced fumbles. They're playing the Denver Broncos. So I really need to explain that. Half the people don't show up to Russell Wilson's birthday. Yeah. They're not showing up to his birthday. He's singing Sierra's songs on his own at karaoke at the birthday. It's just a sad affair. Apparently, he's lost people there. But the one thing is, from that team, that's my median defense for 2,400, because if there was a bright shining star in Denver right now, it would be that defensive squad. And I feel so bad for him. That defensive squad was the reason I picked the Eagles and the Broncos in the Super Bowl, which clearly isn't going to win. But I picked that defense. They got talent. They stop the people from scoring because they have to, because their offense can't score 17 points in 9 games this season, which is outrageous. So that game, I got low scoring vibes from that game regardless. I'm hoping for sacks. Lamar runs around, holds the ball a little bit too long sometimes here and there. You might get a few extra sacks. And then I had to pull something from the show, and I had to beat up on my own team. So I picked the Titans, the 2,200. And this is pretty much what I do with defense all the time, is I kind of just like, who's the bottom 3? Which one has the best chance of getting me the most points? Give me that. Because I don't like to spend money there. But just the narratives of the game. The Eagles like to run. Titans are really good at the run defense. The Titans like to run up the middle. The Eagles struggle with the run up the middle. The Titans pass defense, yes, it's bad, but they've had a couple of decent games, like for a little bit of the game against the Chiefs and a little bit of the game against the Bengals. They have moments, and God forbid they just figure out. Let's say Devonta Smith's groin is done. He misses half the game. He goes out in the first drive. They double team A.J. Brown. There's no Dallas Goedert there to help. Now it's just Jalen Hurts back before in the beginning of like his rookie season style game. And I don't like that. That makes me nervous. So for 2,200, I'll take the shot. It's a defense. I'm just taking a shot here, hoping that you could stop the other team's best weapon, which is our run game, and then hopefully get a couple sacks on top of it. If you get that pick 6, great. I don't see that happening here, but I'm only spending 2,200, so I don't care.
Joe, what you got for us, buddy?
I'm with you. No, I think unsurprisingly, if anyone listens to this pod, I'm with you on Seattle as my higher tier one, because again, the Rams have been awful. 6 of their last 8 games, under 20 points. 7 of the last 8, they've given up multiple sacks. This is a team in free fall. Congratulations, Lions fans, since you have their first pick. And Seattle, obviously, they have everything to play for. Giants or Washington, one of them will lose a game, which means this is a great chance for them, regardless of what San Francisco does, to improve their playoff spot. So I expect them to be at the top of their game. Again, even though I picked my Giants, I'm going to say the Washington defense anyway, because if I'm wrong and the Giants lose this game, it could get pretty bad, because this defense has been playing so much better than they looked at the start of the season. This whole team looked like a wreck at the start.
Still might get Chase Young back, right?
I don't know if he's coming back. I know that they, activated him or whatever. I don't know if he's going to be active for this game.
They have 21 days or he's done for the season. Right. So they got to bring him back at some point.
I would certainly hope that he will come back in 4 weeks after the Commanders are done. I hope he doesn't come back, basically, because, I don't root for injuries, but also the Giants play them twice in the next 3 weeks. But, I think you have a front 7 that's looked pretty good without him recently. They only had 1 sack against your Falcons, but it, destroyed Houston. They've given up 21 points or less in – what is it? 8 straight games, or what is this? 8 straight games. Yeah. So they haven't gotten their asses kicked by anybody recently, and they've had a couple of really big games. And Yeah, I think worst case you score like 6 points because the Giants aren't going to light it up. But I think my favorite is the Jets at 2,600. This is probably going to be the one I play the most. I think Sauce Gardner is legitimately playing at an all-pro level. You have him to throw at Justin Jefferson. And if you can just limit Justin Jefferson and force Kirk Cousins to make multiple reads, if you disguise a couple defenses, again, this Vikings team is not that good. They're like 8-2, but I'm pretty sure like DVOA, they're like 22nd, right behind my Giants. Yeah. And I think this Jets defense is real. So yeah, this is again a defense where you just go on DK. 8 straight weeks they've scored at least 7 points, and they cost 2,600. So if we don't even need the full Kirk Cousins meltdown, and this could be a solid play. And if we get that, which I think is overdue
after the primetime game last week. So
I know I parlayed all 3 winners on Thursday, and I lost the bet because Kirk Cousins didn't have the meltdown. So he better give it to me now.
Same, man. That parlay killed me because I thought the same thing was coming, but it ruined me. But I like that play a lot. I played the Jets a lot lately because of something like that. Like what you say, it was 7 points every time. Again, just somebody that pressures the quarterback. Those pressures lead to turnovers. Turnovers can lead to pick sixes. I'm throwing a dart like I am with tight ends. So that's just kind of my theory.
I love it. We have reached the end of the pod. I've tried to, pick against my Falcons as much as possible. Joe has tried to jinx Terry McLaurin again. Son of a bitch. I will take him out of all my lineups. Joe, man, I really appreciate you coming on. Do you have anything you want to plug, say, sing? Do you want to perform before you leave anything?
No, I am not singing. Nobody needs that. You'll lose every follower. But I really appreciate you guys letting me come on. I watch all your plays. I watch all that stuff. You guys have been crushing it lately. Nothing special for me, just my shows on Fridays with live betting show at 5 p.m., Wager Wire on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. I love spaces because I don't have to get dressed for them or even look decent. Like, they're fantastic. But I also have 2 boxing matches coming up, and one is going to actually be a charity boxing match for cancer. So just kind of keep an eye out for that. If everybody can just help out to KO cancer, that'll be great. If you guys all donate, then I promise to knock the guy out in the first round.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Are we going to be able to live stream this thing too?
Yes. So I know that the March 11th one with Celebrity Boxing, that's definitely going to be a pay-per-view for sure. The Haymakers for Hope thing, I think it's Instagram Live that you have to go on, but I will double check that and get back to you on that. That one's April 27th, so we got more than enough time for me to lose this little gut that I'm keeping off camera right now.
I love it. Dude, let us, seriously, please send us the links for donations and stuff. We'd like to share that both within the Fantasy and Frames group and obviously tweet it out from all of our pages and stuff.
No, I appreciate that.
Absolutely, man.
Listen, if we get past $5,000, I promise I'll knock them out within the first 15 seconds. That's what I tell everybody.
It's like Mike Tyson all over again.
Listen, I cannot come out of that ring a loser. My friends are vicious. They're worse than any enemy I have. So I cannot come out of that ring a loser, and I cannot come out even giving that guy a shot. Whoever it is, they might be great people, but I'm going to have to.
You have no idea who it even is yet.
I love it. No clue. I got no clue for either fight on who I'm fighting yet, but it really doesn't matter to me because I have to go in that ring and knock him out, or I'm not coming out.
I love it. It's Debo all over again from Friday. So, Joe, seriously, really appreciate having you on. Joe, it was cool that you were here too, but it would have been cool if it was just me and Joe, but that's okay.
I'm all for Joe's, man. I'm all for
any World Cup stuff you want to get into real quickly, Joe? Like how you probably already won the bracket real quick.
Did you win the bracket already?
No, I'm totally fucked, man.
I had Germany in the final.
Place. How am I not fucked? I had Germany in like the semis, so I'm done. I'm out. Let's go USA.
Both of us are not going to do soccer podcasts anytime soon, is what you're saying.
Tomorrow, Ghana gets its revenge against Uruguay for the handball in 2010. Let's go.
I like it.
Let's go USA Saturday. Let's just do that. That's all we got going for us. But again, Joe, you were the man for coming on here. Please be sure again to follow the Daily Fix Pod. Obviously, check out the Fantasy and Frames website, Twitter page, Instagram, TikTok. I mean, we got it all. So we got the waiver wire ads coming up, chasing upside. Seriously, as much good stuff as possible. IDP. If you do fantasy, check out Fantasy and Frames. If you do daily fantasy, give us a follow. And Joe and Keith, that wasn't confusing at all. This has been the Week 13 preview of the Daily Fix podcast. We'll see you guys soon.